So good morning, everybody. So I am Adeline Alonso Ugaglia. I'm happy to be here to present you some preliminary results about adaptation strategies of Bordeaux's wine growers to face climate change. I am saying Bordeaux's wine growers, just to be precise. When I'm saying wine growers, I mean grape and wine growers, because we have two different types of producers in Bordeaux. And when I mean Bordeaux, I mean the whole region of Bordeaux. So just to say you some word about the beginning of the story, I am pretty sure that already everybody will agree to say that there is a strong consensus among international scientists, especially after the IPCC report, to accept the existence of climate change, and especially since the papers published by Schultz and Jones, for example, we know that vineyards are especially sensitive to climate variation and to temperature variation, to modifications in the rainfall and so on. So we had begun with Stéphanie by making bibliometrics thanks to network econometric equations, just to explore the literature on climate change and its impact on vineyards. So we have made a systematic search on the web of science, and we have found a lot of paper. We've written a paper from this story, and it will be published soon. And what we've seen is that there is a lot of paper about climate change, but not so much in economics on the web of science. That was the first point. And that these papers are covering different topics, but not really climate change. It's more about global warming in the long run. And they are also covering things like the effect of temperature, the effect on wine quality, the effect on profitability of firms, but nothing special at the microeconomic level. So the idea was to take the chance of a project financed by the National Research Institute for Agricultural Research and also by the Regional Council here in Aquitaine, to work a little bit on the impact of climate change on the farms directly, trying to see if they were implementing or not different strategies to adapt to climate change, why, and what was the result of these strategies. So, of course, I'm not saying that we don't know that we know nothing about the different solutions that are possible implemented in the vineyards, because each time the famous professors in viticulture are publishing papers, they are observing some changes and giving the solutions, but we don't really know if the growers are implementing or not these strategies and how in the short and the long run. So the idea was that it was very important to acquire some data about these strategies, because you have probably seen in the literature that there is a lot of people trying to compute models to forecast the impact of climate change in the next year. And I'm particularly thinking about the one that has been written by Anna et al. In 2013, saying that probably we will have no more vineyards in Bordeaux in 2050, but probably the big mistakes they are making in this model is that they are not considering at all the adaptation of the growers. And actually we know, especially in Bordeaux, that they are able to adapt, because a few years ago they were producing mainly white wines, and now this is mainly red ones. This is the same for the environmental regulation. Thanks to this regulation, they have adapted their practices to be more environmental friendly. So we know that's possible. So if we want to have relevant models, we have to acquire some data and information on these adaptation strategies. In this paper, we are considering climate change in two ways. First, in the short run, I mean, this is what I call CC. The idea is that probably, according to the annual variations the growers can face within a campaign, within a vintage, they could adapt or not. So meaning just implementing one-time changes just to face little variation or extreme events, but whatever the size of the variation, do they adapt or not to annual variations. And then we are also considering something more relative to global warming, as it is mainly done in the literature, trying to see if they are also adapting in the long run. I mean, are they forecasting some big changes in the long run and adapting their practices in the vineyards this way? So we are differentiating strategic flexibility every year and also structural evolution of their practices according to climate change. So the idea was to try to identify if they adapt or not in the short run and why. To identify if they are adapting one time, do they adapt another one, every vintage or not? Because it's possible that they are only adapted one time and not after. And to see if they were adapting or not in the long run and why. So we've worked on the Bordeaux region, as I was saying in the introduction, because we had no data available to do such a study. So we've made a survey. So we chose to work on the Bordeaux wine region. So you have the size and 57 appellations. You just have to note that nearly 100% are under appellation system. Appellation d'origine contrôlée GREThA. And the data are from CIVB 2015 because the survey was made last year. And we've worked on both appellations. The first one is Saint-Emilion and its satellites because it's known as being famous, prestigious, with a good value for the wine, but also a very innovative appellation with a lot of capacity to change. And so this is the little circle, and we have also worked on the Bordeaux Supérieur appellation, the generic one, meaning it's possible to produce Bordeaux Supérieur everywhere in the area you can see on the screen. But we have just kept producers claiming Bordeaux Supérieur as their main appellation, and the same for Saint-Emilion. So we are sure that our two groups are representing only producers producing mainly Saint-Emilion or mainly Bordeaux Supérieur. So we got 321 answers from grape and wine growers from this area. So you can see in the boxes that we have more in the Bordeaux Supérieur appellation. That's rather normal because there are more people in this appellation. 233 and 88 people in Saint-Emilion. So we had an interview mainly by phone or by internet, depending on what we were able to manage. And we have tasted a survey with them with something like 60 questions, not on climate change directly because we didn't want to influence their answers. So we were just talking about the effet millésime or vintage effect, if you prefer in English. And so the idea was if they first were able to link vintage effect and climate change, and then what were their strategy in this case. We've worked on three different, we had general questions, and we've worked on three different vintages we have chosen for their specific climatic conditions. So it was 2003 that had hot summer, especially at the end. 2010 was supposed to be the perfect millésime here in Bordeaux, and 2013 just because it was cold and wet. So we have very different climatic conditions in our data. So this is just the information we got, so something general that we can find in economics of innovation, age, education level, and so on. Some information about production and commercialization, to see if it was more technical adaptation in the vineyards, in the cellar, or marketing adaptations. Then questions for the three specific vintages, and then questions on long-term anticipations. So for the results, the first thing is that they are very aware of climate change, because when we are trying to associate with them some words to vintage effect, they are directly coming to climate words like rain, temperature, and so on. And if you ask them if they are able to identify some specific vintages according to a vintage effect, at the beginning they can't, because it seems so usual for them to adapt to every vintage that that's just impossible for them at the beginning. And if they think a little bit about that, they are giving a 2003, 5, 10, and 13. So our assumption at the beginning to work on 2003, 10, and 13 was not so bad. They estimate to globally benefit from climate change for nearly the main part of them. And what I can first say is that they are adapting depending on the vintage. So the good point is that they are adapting every year, because they are adapting in 2003, 10, and 13, but not the same range. And according to their group, Saint-Émilion or Bordeaux Supérieur, with a premium for Saint-Émilion. So I will try to be fast. So they are also adapting for cold and humid vintage. So it's not just linked to temperature and increase in temperature. They are nearly only adapting for the technical part in the vineyard. We have almost nothing about the cellar and the marketing strategies. This is different according to the vintage, so they don't focus on the same practices according to the different vintages. They have some regrets, so we can ask if they are learning every year or not. And they have always seeded the same breaks. So that's probably something to explore further, because that's strange, because if they are used to adapt, they should be able to manage that. So they are maintaining their strategic flexibility, a little bit less in 2010, but that's rather normal because it was rather easy to manage. In the long run, this is not so much people adapting in the long run, only 22%, considering long-term modifications, once again, mainly technical ones. And the main one is the harvest date made earlier in the campaign. But it means that they don't think of it every year. That's normal for them. No, that's earlier. That's like this in the long run. The plantation density and nothing about wine processing and marketing once again. We were supposing that the appellation rules could be a big break for adaptation, and that's rather interesting to see that it seems that there is no problem with that for the growers. You have two types of people. Some of them are just thinking that that's okay, they can adapt. There is space enough in the appellation rules to adapt and to face climate change. And the other part of them have said, okay, we have always adapted our practices and the rules are following. So they can change, it's not a problem. So they prefer to keep the premium to be in the appellation system instead of going out and trying to implement something more innovative. We just have a model, so like the time is nearly finished, I directly go to the results of the ProBreed model, a rather simple one, trying to test the drivers. So something rather general, it's better, they adapt more easily if they have a high education level, for example. They are more prone to adapt if they are bottling the wine more than if they are cooperators, and for the cooperators, this is the contrary. I don't know why, I have to explore that further, but it seems that if they are cooperative members, they adapt less than if they were not. So the appellation context matter because Saint-Émilion is more prone to adaptation. And we have also seen that being certified, environmentally speaking, in a large sense, referring to the first session, organic, sustainable development, and so on, is a good point to adapt to climate change. They are more prone to adapt their practices. And experience matters because we have introduced a variable of in the adaptation for 2003. So this model has been computed for 2013. And we have introduced the adaptation in 2003, and we see that it works. They are more prone to have adapted their practices in 2013 if they have adapted before. So we would like to improve the model to include all the data we have for the different vintages, something more dynamic, and it was just the first stage for the moment. So just to... okay, so this is still going on. We have still a lot of work to do, but it was a first point to show that they maintain their strategic flexibility, whatever or not they are adapting in the long run. And that now we have to go further in our data, for example, to explore our economic data, because I didn't mention it, but we have also economic data. And we will improve the probit just to be able to improve the quality of the paper, I guess. Thank you for your attention.